Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Vinamine Nana Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Bhaktivyarashitarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Bhaktivyarashitarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada श्री निताय गौर हरि की जय श्री वामन द्वादशी की जय वर्धमान देव की जय श्री पार्श्व एकादशी की जय श्री जीव गोस्वामी की जय श्री प्रभुपाद की जय श्री निताय गौर प्रेमी हरि हरि बोल. So again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. very nice and auspicious day. We're observing both the Parshva Ekadasi as well as the Vamana Dwadashi, and it's also, which is the appearance day of Lavamanade. And it's also the appearance day of Srila Jiva Goswami today. And we had a half day fast because tomorrow is the appearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and last week was last Saturday in particular was the appearance day of Srimati Radharani. So it's been a very nice festive period, and we'll discuss their glories as well this evening in our discussion. Our discussions on chapter 23. So we'll pray for the blessings of our spiritual masters before we go on. Om Gyanatmirandasya Dinangina Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Swapantivam Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Namaste Bhaktivedantam Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesha Shunivari Vastratiya Deshitarini. So thank you all so much for this opportunity. We try to present an overview on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This wonderful work by Srila Prabhupada based on the biography of Lord Chaitanya called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I pray for all your blessings to do justice to this great work so that we can have a better understanding of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings and his glorious pastimes as well, so we can serve him better. So this chapter is called Why Study the Vedanta Sutra, and it follows the conversion of Prakashananda Saraswati, the great Mayavad philosopher, and his followers, who at that time dominant in Benares, the area that is today called Varanasi. After they had heard the Lord's presentation on the real aim of Vedanta Sutra, which they had understood from a Mayavad perspective, they asked Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to explain further, having developed that taste for hearing. Previously, we concluded the last part, the fifth part of our discussions on this chapter, by speaking particularly about verse 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam, that is Canto 1, Chapter 1, verse 1. This verse is, of course, containing the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we said that since Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of the Gayatri Mantra, this mantra is actually the essence of the Gayatri Mantra, the essential explanation, you could say. So we began our discussion on this verse, and today we're going to continue that discussion. So let's chant the invocation prayer to begin. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda. And the translation is: Glory to Shri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Shri Gaura, Lord Chaitanya. So this verse is it's 18 of the first chapter of Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we'll begin reading from chapter 23. Atheists like Ravan and Hiranyakashipu had to undergo severe austerities before they could flout the authority of the Lord. But ultimately they were so helpless that they could not save themselves when the Lord appeared before them as cruel death. This is also applicable to the modern atheists who dare flout the authority of the Lord. Such atheists will be dealt the same awards as were given in the past to great atheists like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu. History repeats itself, and what occurred in the past will recur again and again when there is necessity. Whenever the authority of the Lord is neglected, the penalties dealt by the laws of nature are always there. So this warning follows after our discussion on how, again from verse 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam, on how the Lord is the supreme creator, and as the supreme creator, he pervades everything, and all of us who are, of course, part of his creation are dependent on him fully, and therefore should be serving the Lord in order to fulfill our purpose. Everything, in fact, is meant for the service of the Lord. But those who flout the authority, examples given here, demons like Hiranyakashipu and Ravan, they're liable to be punished for their disobedience to being engaged in the service of the Lord. Now, that service of the Lord is not something artificial. It's not being imposed upon us. Service of the Lord is the natural condition of the living entity. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of how the natural condition of sugar is to be sweet. If you have another white substance that's not sweet, it's not sugar. You can't have a substance called sugar that isn't sweet. It's inherent in the nature. So in the same way, inherent in the nature of the soul is to render service. It's not something that is being forced upon the soul. When the soul does not engage in that service under the spell of illusion, like these demons, then karma is dealt to them, not just to punish them for it, but to actually help them learn from it. Because eventually the Lord wants everyone back into their constitutional positions in service to Him, because that service is in love. The Lord loves His creations who are His children. We also quoted previously the verse that Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, Aham bija pradapita. Everyone is His children. So when He punishes the demons like Ravan and Hiranyakashipu, it's actually in the mood of a loving father who has no other recourse but to punish his errant children. That's actually what happens. And we also discussed many months ago that the Lord gives the demons many opportunities to reform themselves, to give up their ways of disobedience. Right? We'll take one example in particular, Ravan. Ravan was given good counsel by many personalities, both from his own family, including his brother Vibhishan, and from the side of Lord Ram. Hanuman went across the ocean and practically pleaded with Ravan to return Mother Sita to Lord Ram, and Ravan refused. So eventually, war became the only option. In the same way, Krishna himself went to Duryodhana and the Kauravas and offered a truce on behalf of the Pandavas, and again, demoniac mentality pervaded, and war was inevitable. So the Lord also gives us many opportunities. The warnings come in terms of our karma. Whenever something goes wrong, it's our opportunity to ask ourselves why this has happened. What did we actually do to make it happen? What we can learn from it so that it doesn't happen again. Karma is there to help us to progress towards the Lord. It's not just there to punish us. But we keep missing these important lessons, and we keep insisting on trying to have everything for our own benefit or for our own pleasure, or used in the service of ourselves instead of the Lord. So in a way, we could say that we're small demons. We're small Ravanas and Hiranyakashipus. Ravan and Hiranyakashipu wanted to control the whole universe. We just want to control our little homes, our little families, our jobs, and so on. But the bottom line is, like Sri Ishopanishad states, everything belongs to the Lord. Everything is the Lord's property. Whether it's a little house like ours or whether it's the universe, everything is meant to be used in the Lord's service, and we are meant to be engaged in that service. So if we're trying to utilize anything for ourselves, then we're to be considered thieves. And demons like Ravan and Hiranyakashipu needed to be dealt with by the Supreme Lord, because they performed great austerities to try and escape the laws of material nature. So it was a little bit difficult for the demigods to deal with them. So the Lord appeared to kill them. But in terms of us, modern day little Hiranyakashipus and Ravan, we can't actually, we don't have the ability to escape the laws of nature, so those can deal with us very easily. And so Srila Prabhupada says that wherever there's necessity, will be punished for those actions. The Lord's not happy about it. Right? Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, we see that the Lord is not pleased that the material nature has to punish us. This is something that is happening because we're bringing that punishment upon ourselves. If we simply follow his laws, he's constantly appearing out of his great mercy to give us those laws. He sends his representatives. He leaves behind Vedic literatures, including, of course, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, that have become available so widely by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. We have every ability to understand what is the right thing to do, engage in devotional service, Uddhav, and then we can basically stop bringing all these negative consequences, bad karma, upon ourselves by flouting the laws of the Supreme Lord. So this is important for us to understand, because also to engage in devotional service to the Lord is to be situated in our original nature. It is pleasing to the Lord, and when we're doing that, we will find that ultimate satisfaction, the fulfillment of our actual purpose, much more than if we're trying to control the universe or trying to control our little homes or anything else for that matter. We think that those things will bring us fulfillment, but that's actually just part of our conditioning. The real fulfillment is being situated fully in the service of the Lord. That the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is all perfect is confirmed in all Shruti mantras. It is said in the Shruti mantras that the all-perfect Lord glanced over matter and thus created all living beings. So again, we're leading back to the verse. The verse 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam is actually describing the qualities of the Lord. So we're continuing that discussion. The Shruti mantras are the mantras that actually originate from the Vedas and the Upanishads themselves. We described before that Shruti refers to that which is heard, the Vedas and the Upanishads in particular, and the Smriti is that which is remembered. The histories like the Puranas and the Itihas like Mahabharata. So a lot of people put some weak arguments forward that the Shruti mantras are more authoritative sources of knowledge than the Smriti, and Puranas, and so on. But either way, there's correlation between them. What Srimad Bhagavatam is stating about the Lord being the supreme creator of everything is also stated in the Shruti. The Shruti states that the Lord glances over the material nature, and that's how creation begins. Nothing is actually possible without the intervention of the Lord. But he is so powerful that he doesn't have to actually get into the work of creation. Right? The way we said before, a builder might have to pick up bricks and mortar and actually physically put a building together. The Lord doesn't have to do that. He just glances over the material nature, he activates the ingredients, and everything begins from there. Time is injected into material nature, the three modes get set into action. From there, the karma of the living entity starts playing out. The living entities themselves, through the glance of the Lord, are placed into the material nature, and then when Brahma is created from the Lord, then he can create the bodies of those entities so that their karma can then come into play. So all of this is happening under the direction of the Lord, who is the ultimate control of everything, and who is the actual supreme creator. Brahma himself is the secondary creator. The living beings are parts and parcels of the Lord, and he impregnates the vast material nature with the seeds of the spiritual sparks. That's the souls. Thus, the creative energies are set in motion for so many wonderful creations. When one atheist argued that God is no more expert than the manufacturer of a subtle watch that has so many delicate parts, we had to reply that God is a greater mechanic than the watchmaker, because he creates one machine in male and female forms that go on producing innumerable similar machines without the further attention of God. If a man could manufacture a set of machines capable of producing other machines without the man giving the matter any further attention, then that man could be said to equal the intelligence of God. But that is not possible. So people are always challenging the power of the Lord, even if they give in to the idea of a supreme creator, like Srila Prabhupada says. They make another weak argument that God is simply a kind of engineer who is putting the parts together. But the thing is that the creation of the Lord is so much more wonderful than any machinery that any person um, can actually put together. And this good example that Srila Prabhupada gives here is of the human species, or any species, for example, animal, bird, and so on. Those species are able to do, well, practically everything that the Lord empowers them to do, whereas machines are very limited in their abilities. They always require maintenance, and this is not required for the wonderful machinery of the living entities. And certainly machines can't reproduce themselves. This is also a very important point. And the amazing thing is that all of this is going on without the Lord actually having to be present there. He has all his, we could say, systems in place to make sure that absolutely everything is happening down to the finest detail. Another example that Srila Prabhupada used to give is the mosquito, for example. The mosquito knows exactly where to go to find its meal. It knows where to find its shelter. It knows, again, by the arrangement of the Lord, by the guidance of the Lord, without him actually having to be there telling the mosquito what to do, how to live its entire existence. And yet it is so minuscule, right? We can create flying machines, this is certain, but those machines have to be of a certain size in order to accommodate all of the operational gadgets within it. What to speak of the fact that it can't exactly ride itself or program itself, and even if it could, it can only perform a set number of duties. Certainly, it has no ability to reproduce itself. So we could go on and on and on like this, understanding the glories of the Lord's creation. And the bottom line is that no ordinary person could actually do this. Each and every one of man's imperfect machines has to be handled individually by a mechanic, because no one can equal to God in intelligence. Another name for God is Asamodva, which indicates that no one is equal to or greater than him. Everyone has his intellectual equal and superior, and no one can claim that he has neither. So this is actually one of our problems, because we come into the material world to try to be supreme, and then we realize that there's always somebody who's either able to do what we can do, are we equal, as Sri Prabhupada states here, intellectually, or someone who's better than us, and we're always competing in some way or the other. No one actually can say that they're the best in their field, and even if they seem to be, it doesn't last. Right? Everybody reaches their peak and then declines. Something brings that spell of apparent greatness to an end. Some may claim to be the greatest of all time, but that doesn't actually mean that that's true. But only Krishna himself actually has no equal or no superior. This is why his name is Asamodva. But this is not the case with the Lord. And so, leading on to the greatness of the Lord, we'll read that verse, Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1:1, to recap before we move on to the next point from the same verse. Right? So the translation is, O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. And so we discussed how this verse is referring specifically to Krishna or even to Lord Balaram, but just them as the all-pervading supreme personalities of Godhead, above even all the other expansions and incarnations. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universe. So we discussed this point about the Lord being the supreme creator. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. So this is our discussion last week, how the Lord is Abhigya, conscious of everything, and Swarat, supremely independent. Right? And this is where this is what we came to today. And the next point, it is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion as one He is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. So these are the 2 points that we will discuss today. So we'll read the rest of the verse. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the 3 modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. Meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. So in what is known as Hinduism today, Sanatana Dharma, people understand Lord Brahma to be the creator. This is his traditional role. But we know from Srimad Bhagavatam that Lord Brahma is only the secondary creator. He creates under the instruction of the Supreme Lord. He creates after being empowered by the Supreme Lord. And he creates after the Lord actually creates the first series of material manifestations. Right? So let's continue reading. The Shruti mantras indicate that before the creation of the material universe, there existed the Lord, who is the master of everyone. It was the Lord who instructed Brahma in Vedic knowledge. That personality of Godhead has to be obeyed in all respects. Anyone who wants to become freed from material entanglement must surrender unto him, and this is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. So we've discussed that this entire universe, all its systems of karma, whether good or bad, everything that is occurring is meant to help us understand that this is not our home, that we have our original spiritual abode in the service of the Lord. And this is what we're actually supposed to be aiming for. This is what Brahma himself understood from the Lord when he was enlightened by the Gayatri Mantra. The Gayatri Mantra emanated from the Lord's flute and it enlightened Brahma as to his actual function in creating this universe. Because obviously, when an engineer is involved in a project, they have to know what the function of the project is. So Brahma himself was enlightened through the Gayatri Mantra that the living entities have a relationship with the Supreme Lord of service. They have come into this material world, and under the spell of material energy, they're acting as though they are the controllers. But eventually, through devotional service, they have to revive their original conditions and attain Him. So to that end, all the Vedic knowledge that was revealed to Brahmaji from the Lord is all to help the living entities achieve that liberation from this material world. So Brahma was able to execute his function in creating this material universe for that purpose. And the guidance that we are getting here is that if Brahma, this first created being, this very powerful creator of the material universe, our great grandfather, and therefore esteemed superior, is taking instruction from the Supreme Lord in order to fulfill his duties of life perfectly, then so should we. No one, not the greatest atheist or scientist or politician or anyone in particular, can actually even equal the greatness of Brahma, what to speak of the greatness of the Lord. And so they should simply follow in his footsteps, take the instruction of the Lord in order to achieve their perfection of life. Unless one surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of the, unless one surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, it is sure and certain that one will be bewildered, even if he happens to be a great mind. Now, when Brahma was first created, he of course possessed the greatest mind in the universe. That was why he earned the position of Brahma. Everything that we achieve is earned by some piety in our previous life, and the position of Brahma is given to the most pious living entity in the universe. But even when he was created, he had no idea what to do next. He was bewildered, as we all are at some point or the other. And so he searched out his origin, and when he could not find that, he heard the word tapa, austerity. And understanding what that meant, he started performing austerity. He surrendered to the Lord in austerity. And when the Lord was pleased with his 100 celestial years of austerity, he was enlightened in order to perform his function. So in the same way, everyone needs the mercy of the Lord. Everyone needs to surrender to the Lord in order to be free of the bewilderment that may affect us. Whether that bewilderment is just our day-to-day confusions or difficulties, or whether it is the great bewilderment of how to get out of this material nature, how to come out of the spell of Maya, because that is actually the greatest bewilderment. Maya is a very powerful energy of the Lord, and it's not so easy to overcome her. Like Krishna himself says that in Bhagavad Gita. Like this verse, Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1:1 says, by him even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. So no matter how powerful the demigods are, again, much more powerful than any ordinary living entity was present today, no matter how great the sages are, we know they're very powerful. We read about their abilities because of their yogic practices or their great austerities or their spiritual power. They all get bewildered at some point, right? The great demigods, we have at least 3 examples of how they became bewildered. We recall from Srimad Bhagavatam that Lord Brahma was bewildered by the Lord. He tried to steal the boys, the cowherd boys and calves, and he thought that he was playing a trick on the Lord, and the Lord actually tricked him and actually used the opportunity to allow the cowherd woman and the cows to nurse him as their child. This was their great desire. But in the end, Brahma understood his mistake, and he apologized to the Lord very humbly. And then, of course, there was Indra, who also became bewildered by the material energy under the spell of pride. He thought that Krishna had defied him and tried to kill Krishna, kill all of the Lord's associates in Vrindavan. For this, he was also chastised by the Lord, and he apologized as well. And Lord Shiva, very great and powerful Devata whom we respect very well, but he was also bewildered by the Lord's incarnation of Mohini Murti. At least his bewilderment was very short. He's a very powerful spiritual personality. But he was left amazed by how strong the Lord's illusory energy is. Right? And so if Lord Shiva is impressed with it, we can't think that we are independent of it. Maya has all of us under her control. And the only way that we can actually get out of that illusion is by surrendering to the Lord. It's simple. All the great demigods set that example. When they were bewildered, they surrendered to the Lord. They were forgiven for their offenses. They learned an important lesson, and they could move on with their devotional service with success. This is what we are supposed to do as well. Yeah. The most intelligent solution is to surrender to the Lord. Only when great minds surrender unto the lotus feet of Vasudeva, right? We remember that Vasudeva referred to in this verse is Krishna. Only when great minds surrender unto the lotus feet of Vasudeva and know fully that Vasudeva is the cause of all causes, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 19, can they become Mahatmas, or the truly broad-minded. So we'll quote that verse, 7:19 from Bhagavad Gita. Daryesha gunamayi mama maya duratya mam evaye pravatyante mayam etam tarantite. And the translation is, this divine energy of mind, consisting of the 3 modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who are surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So here we've heard it from the Lord himself. He knows his energy better than anyone else. Right? If the great demigods and the great sages struggle with illusion, we can't expect that we're going to be able to do better than them. We can definitely follow their example. We can surrender to the Lord, and as he says, we can easily cross beyond it. So those who have done this are referred to in this verse as, or referred to by Srila Prabhupada as Mahatmas, right? Or the truly broad-minded. These are the people who surrendered to the Lord and crossed over the material nature. So this definition of Mahatma is very interesting, right? Broad-minded. The opposite of a Mahatma is a Duratma. And Srila Prabhupada translates this word as cripple-minded. So let's see how Srila Prabhupada expands further on these two words, right? We'll quote him in a class in Vrindavan in 1972. Mahatma means broad-minded, and Duratma means cripple-minded. Just the opposite word. Duratma. Dura means far away from Krishna consciousness. Duratma. So Dur, far, and Atma, soul, far away. And Mahatma, Mahan, Mahato, Mahiyan, Krishna. So whose Atma is attached to the Supreme, the Great, he is called Mahatma, right? So Mahan, as Srila Prabhupada described it, is Krishna. The Atma that is near to Krishna is, or attached to Krishna, is Mahatma. So Dur Atma means one who is under the influence of this material nature, far, far away from Krishna. This is very interesting because we know that Krishna is within our heart. That's how he's all pervading of everything. He's present in the atoms, present in our hearts, the hearts of every living being. So how we are far away from him? We're far away because as long as we're under the influence of material nature, this is a covering over our relationship with the Lord. So that even though he's right there, present within our hearts, we have no recognition of him as our Supreme Master, as our Supreme Father, as a Supreme Object of love. We can think of it in another way. We said that the Lord was present before Duryodhana and others. He even displayed his universal form. But they did not recognize him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right in front of them. So it means that even if the Lord is physically close to us, it doesn't mean that we actually are close to him. We're very, very far from him, figuratively, because of the influence of the material nature. So Mahatma, they are always attached with Krishna. Mahatmanastu mam partha daivim prakritim ashtaha. This verse is chapter 9, text 13 of Bhagavad Gita. They are no longer under the influence of this material nature. So it really is as simple as that. We become free from the influence of material nature and Krishna is suddenly revealed within our heart. That closeness of him is actually realized by us. It's there, we just haven't realized it. So removing the influence of the material nature brings that realization to us that the Lord is actually with us all the time. Anyone who surrenders to Krishna, takes Krishna, everything, is no longer under the influence of this material nature. That is the significance. So Srila Prabhupada has also described the material nature as durashraya. When we're trying to belong to this material nature, thinking ourselves products of it, we're basically taking shelter of the material nature. Durashraya is shelter. When we give up the shelter of material nature, we recognize ourselves not to be products of material nature. We recognize ourselves to be servants of the Lord and we surrender to him. Now we're accepting the shelter of Krishna. As long as we're under the shelter of anything else, we can't expect the Lord to step in and offer us his shelter. As we also said many times, he respects our independence. We have to prove to him, show him that we really want him to be our eternal master, that we really want to be under his shelter. We have to show him that we really want to be surrendered to him. He helps us in that way. He brings us under our care. He brings us under his care. And such a person immediately becomes free of the influence of material nature. So that person is therefore called a Mahatma. They are a great soul. Mahat, of course, is great soul because they've surrendered to Krishna. Right? And another way that we read this discussion now, because they're attached to Mahan, the great Krishna, that soul, that Atma, is attached to Krishna, Mahan, then they're also known as Mahatma. So two different ways we can understand that word. So this person's mind or intelligence is therefore great. This is how Srila Prabhupada refers to them as broad-minded. They're making absolute use of the mind or the intelligence. And the person who is a Dura Atma has a very narrow understanding of reality. Therefore, Prabhupada calls them triple-minded, small-minded. because they actually don't understand things as they are. They're still trying to take shelter of material nature. But such broad-minded Mahatmas are rarely seen. Only they, however, can understand that the Supreme Lord, the absolute personality of Godhead, is the primeval cause of all causes. They can read this verse 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam and actually understand that Krishna is the cause of all, and therefore they can dedicate themselves to the service of that supreme cause of all. He is the ultimate or parama truth, because all other truths are dependent on him. So we are all little truths, right? Little truths, because we're always true, our existence is eternal, but everyone else is dependent on the supreme truth. That famous verse, Nitya Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam, and also Shruti mantra. He is maintaining all of us. We are not independent of him. And so everything that he is maintaining us with is meant for his service, for it to be applied in its proper capacity, including ourselves. And because he is the source of everyone's knowledge, he is omniscient. There is no illusion for him, as there is for the relative knower. So we only have the knowledge of ourselves. Krishna has the knowledge of everything. Even that knowledge of ourselves is imperfect. We don't know what's happening in our bodies in every single place. Krishna has awareness of everything, everywhere. So this is how verse 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam can state that the Lord is all-pervading, that he is indirectly or directly conscious of everything at all times. And again, of course, that he is the only independent, because everyone else is dependent on him. So it's very important that we understand all these truths about Krishna and understand the truth about ourselves, so we can be situated in our original position as well. And the only way that we can actually do that is through the mercy of the Lord. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, text 10, that's one of our favorite verses, that he gives that understanding if we're engaging sincerely in his service. And of course, we have to constantly hear about these glories, hear about what the scripture says about the Lord, so that that faith can be built up for us to want to be dedicated to his service. And the result of that understanding, having that understanding of the Lord, is also explained by him. Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, text 9, where he says that if we understand him about his eternal nature, his appearance and activities, then we don't take birth again. And we said that that's the purpose of this universe, right? To ensure that we don't take birth again, that we don't come back, that we don't keep rotating in the material world. So this is how this is all connected. We need the understanding of the Lord, right, in order to achieve that perfection of life and get out of this material world. And we get the understanding from the Lord when we engage in devotion service, because he says he gives the understanding to those who are engaged constantly in his service. Right? So we'll recap that. We need the understanding of the Lord, his nature and his activities, right, as described in all the scriptures, including this wonderful verse 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam. We need that understanding to get out of the material world. This the Lord explains in Bhagavad Gita. And we get the understanding from the Lord when we engage in his service. Right? This he also tells us in Bhagavad Gita. So what service in particular should we be engaged in? Well, this is a matter for the intelligent. Right? Srimad Bhagavatam gives us the answer. What should the intelligent be doing in this age of Kali Yuga? What service should they be engaged in order to get the understanding from the Lord that we need to get out of this material world? We will quote Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 5, text 32, very famous verse. Krishna Varanam Tusha Krishna Sangopangastra Parshadam Yagyai Sankirtane Prai Vijanti Hisu Medasaha. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. So this is what the intelligent should be doing, right? There's this word, it's a hyphenated word. Sumedasaha, they're very intelligent, right? This is what we should be doing. We should be chanting the holy names of the Lord, right? That's the way to be constantly serving the Lord. Through that, we get the ultimate understanding from him, of him, and that's how we can get out of this material world. So people question this sometimes. they question the Srimad Bhagavatam. As we said, they try to discredit the Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll actually come to that in a little while. And they say even Bhagavad Gita, which even impersonalists tend to accept, they tend to ask, well, Krishna didn't exactly point out the chanting of the holy name in the Bhagavad Gita, so what gives? Well, we said that the Bhagavad Gita is a summary of the Vedas. This is actually the knowledge that Krishna was giving us because we don't actually have the intelligence to study the Vedas like people used to in previous ages. And even if we could, it's very difficult to get through it. So the Lord, before this Kali Yuga set in, he summarized the teachings of the Vedas. And of course, the Vedas contain many parts in order to achieve the Lord because of the levels of understandings of different people, right? His Vedas Raghunatha Prabhu is giving a very nice example that if a father has children of different capacities of learning, and perhaps they're different ages, then he'll provide an education that's suitable for those different ages, right? So for a 5-year-old child, they'll get a preschool education, and for a child who's at university, they'll get a university education. Now, you can't compare the two. The one may take longer. The child who's 5 years old has a lot of time to go before they can get to a university level, but the Lord still, or the Father still provides an education for that child to get to that point eventually. So in the same way, the Lord is providing the different paths for people to eventually attain Him. It's not true that all paths will lead to the same goal. A 5-year-old is not going to be able to take their preschool education and go get a job in the working world, like the university educated child is going to be able to take their degree and get a job, right? It's just not possible to equate the two. But eventually, by sincerely engaging in the path that the person has found themselves in, by karma, whatever life circumstances, they will eventually be up-leveled, we could say, to the paths that will progressively lead them to devotional service. This is the eventual point for everyone to come to devotional service. Devotional service is like the tertiary education before you can get out into the working world. Devotional service is the tertiary education before we could get to the spiritual world. And of course, it continues there as well. It's not an end in that way. It doesn't end, sorry, in that way. But the point is that all paths eventually need to bring us to devotional service, if you put it that way. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna therefore explains all the different paths, the way the Vedas does. So yes, there may be the path of jnana stated, and there may be the paths of yoga stated, but Krishna still declares, whenever he explains all these paths, that devotional service to him is still the best. Right? Each chapter practically ends in the same way to bring us to that understanding that you can take the longer route indeed, but longer means over lifetimes. Right? We don't have that kind of time. We don't want to keep coming back here to suffer. So rather take the shorter route, the route that the Lord repeatedly emphasizes. Yeah, Bhakti Amam Avijanati. You can only understand me by devotional service. And we come back to the same point. So if we understand the Lord, that's the way we can get back to Him. So you can only get it by devotional service. So take the shorter route. The shorter route of devotional service doesn't mean a shortcut. Right? There's a very big difference. It just means that it's not going to take you lifetimes. It means it's a direct route. It means it's a more potent route. It means it's a goal-directed route, right? So this is why the Lord keeps emphasizing it everywhere in Bhagavad Gita, even though He is indeed explaining other paths. And yes, He does explain about chanting also, right? Because it is a path, one of the direct paths to reach Him. And the chanting is explained in the core chapters of Bhagavad Gita, particularly chapter 9. But the chapters 9, 10, 12, also 7, 8, these chapters are on devotional service in particular. So this is where emphasis is given to how we can reach the Lord in the most effective way, right? The shortest way, the most potent way. So we'll quote the verse where the Lord describes that chanting is one of the methods that one can directly reach Him. Satatam kirtiyanto mam pitanta dodavritah namasyanta shamam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So here we have this term again, great souls. Right? And Srila Prabhupada states in the purport of this verse that these are actually the symptoms of a Mahatma. So there it comes up again. So it always ties up. The teachings of the Lord, the Shruti, the Smriti, everything is congruent. Again, it was given by the Lord himself. So there's no discrepancy like people claim. So this is what a Mahatma does, right? And one of those symptoms is chanting. In the previous ages, chanting was there. Chanting is not a new way to serve the Lord or attain Him or attain the understanding of Him. There were other methods that were also available, though, that were the prime duties for that age in order to achieve self-realization and eventually liberation. Right? We see here endeavoring great devotion. Devotees endeavored with great devotion in meditation in Satya Yuga. They endeavored with great determination with performances of yajna in Treta Yuga. Bowing down before him, deity worship. This was performed in Dwapara Yuga. So in every age, there is a process that is given in particular that suits the abilities, that suits the time, that suits the people of that age, so that they can achieve the Lord and achieve liberation, the purpose of this universe, so they can achieve liberation from it. And we simply can't do all these things. Some people may ask, well, we're still actually doing a deity worship, and this is true, but His Holiness Parthasarathi Das Goswami Maharaj explained very nicely why this is so. We're still in the junctional period. There's always a junctional period, the sandhya between the two ages. So the previous age of Dwapara Yuga was where deity worship was performed. So there's still an overlap. Deity worship is still present. But the chanting of the holy names is the primary way of achieving self-realization and thus liberation out of this material world in this age. And that will become more and more evident as this age progresses. So like the Brihad Naradiya Purana says, there's no other way and no other way and no other way. We simply must accept it. We can make many arguments. It's there in the Bhagavad Gita. It's here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna himself comes in his golden form. He is Krishna Varnam. He is Krishna, but he is Twish-a Krishna. He's not dark complexioned Krishna. Right? He's Krishna Varnam, but he's Akrishnam. He's not dark, but he's the same Krishna. Right? He's in this golden color to come and deliver the process of self-realization for this age, which he has stated in the Bhagavad Gita, but he is emphasizing now in Kali Yuga that of all these processes, this one in particular, this chanting, that's for you. This is what you need to do in this age in order to achieve self-realization, and that, of course, leads to pure devotional service and liberation from this material world. Right? This is what Srimad Bhagavatam is predicting, because Srimad Bhagavatam was written 5,000 years ago. Lord Chaitanya appeared 500 years ago. This is how perfect these Vedic scriptures are. The Srimad Bhagavatam perfectly predicted the Lord's appearance. We see this from this verse. And so we understand then that all these scriptures are congruent. Vedic scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught all these scriptures. And further, he gave understandings that only he could have, right, about how the devotional service can be performed in the rasas that were not described previously in the other ages, right? The rasas of parental love, Sakya ras, the rasas of conjugal love. These further details, as well as the practical ways to perform devotional service in this age, he gave that to his most senior disciples, right, the Goswamis, and he instructed them very carefully and very, the Lord described in great detail. And with that knowledge, the Goswamis were able to write everything that the Lord wanted to teach us about Bhakti Yoga in this age. And this is actually, we could say, an expansion of the Bhakti Yoga from the Vedic scriptures. This is the truth. So the writings of the Goswamis are essential to us. It's actually interesting today's appearance of Srila Jiva Goswami. He was one of these 6 Goswamis. He was the nephew of Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis, and these 2 Goswamis were the most prominent of the 6 Goswamis. So Jiva Goswami, I was reading his name of course, Jiva means life. His name describes how the scriptures that he wrote, he took over writing after the disappearance of Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. They were instructed personally by Lord Chaitanya. He took over writing, and he's actually the most prominent Sanskrit scholar to date. He wrote 500,000, almost, 400,000 Sanskrit verses on Bhakti theology. And it said that his writings are life-giving, hence his name is very apt, Jiva. So we need to take advantage of these literatures in gratitude to the Goswamis, to all the Acharyas, to Srila Prabhupada for making these available to us, to all the devotees who come after Srila Prabhupada who are preaching this knowledge. We need to advance by it, and we need to help others to do so as well. And we're going to conclude here today. We'll have a little more discussion on the significance of these spiritual days just now. And next week we will continue with our discussions on this chapter 23. Shri Shantar Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you all so much for your kind attention. Are there any questions or comments? Anything that can be clarified or contrived?
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, I've got, two questions, or maybe it's a question in two parts. When we're speaking about the demigods, they're still under the control of three modes of material nature. So, for instance, if I had to use Brahma as an example, after he's lived his 100 years, and he takes another birth in the material world, is he still bound by the same forgetfulness as us? Because he might not be a Brahma in the birth after that. He might come down to a lower planet. Is he still bound, or are they all still bound by the same forgetfulness of previous lives as what we are? Or are they sort of more elevated than that?
No, they all are bound by it. We're going to look at chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna actually questions Krishna. Krishna tells Arjuna at the beginning of chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita that he instructed the sun god, and then Arjuna says, well, the sun god is many, many years older than you, and you're about the same age as me. Arjuna and Krishna were, by various accounts, around 100 years, more or less, at the time of Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna is questioning Krishna, how did you instruct him? So Krishna answers, the translation is, the personality of God had said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. And then in that purport, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that even though Arjuna is called a mighty hero who could subdue the enemies, he's unable to recall what happened in his various past births. Therefore, a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, can never equal the Supreme Lord. Okay. So no matter how great these living entities are, the demigods, but they're still living entities, and they're not the same as Krishna. So they can't remember. It's only Krishna that can remember. So Krishna is called, in the Brahma Samhita, Prabhupada says, is infallible, Achyuta. It means that he never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact, but the living entity does forget. So certainly they do, because Srila Prabhupada said that we all were Brahmas at some point, but we've forgotten. That is also practical understanding of this knowledge, that eventually everybody will forget what happened to them. Of course, there are some special instances where living entities can remember by the grace of the Lord, but this is by the grace of the Lord. They don't have that inherent ability to remember. So one example that comes to mind is Bharat Maharaj, right? When he took the birth of a deer, he was able to remember that he was a very advanced king. But this, of course, was the mercy of the Lord, so that he could do something about it in his deer body, so that he could get into a material body, into an elevated body in his next life. So what he did was he stayed close to the ashrams of the sages described in Srimad Bhagavatam. And he took the remnants of their prasad, and he was blessed with their association, even as a deer. And by that, he was able to elevate himself to a human body in his next life. and then he was able to, of course, perfect his life. But this is, of course, a very special scenario, a special concession, the mercy of the Lord, because he's actually achieved as King Bharat the level of bhava. So for him to fall, it was quite extraordinary. So he was given some mercy to remember. But otherwise, we all forget. This is fallible nature of living entities, even the demigods. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, no, that's okay. And then the other question is, we all trying to get out of material nature. That's what we practicing for. We're always saying we want to get into the spiritual world and all this type of thing. But ideally, as Vaishnavas, our main purpose should be to serve the Lord, not necessarily anything selfish as getting out of material nature, although we're in material nature because we want to please ourselves. So if we are serving the Lord correctly and he decides we need to be in material nature in our next birth for whatever service he's got planned for us, but we've ideally been very good Vaishnavas and actually should be escaping from this material nature. I'm just trying to formulate how I'm going to say this.
I understand, yeah.
Is that being in Goloka more a state of mind, although it's spiritual, not physical, more as a state of mind, although we're in the physical world, our spiritual state will still be in Goloka and not covered as it is with most of us now? Would that be sort of a correct way of looking at it? So that we still actually out of material nature in a way, although we are doing service. Like if I had to look at Srila Prabhupada, obviously we all see him as physical and doing physical things and all that, and suffering with his health and all the rest. But would it be correct to say in a way that actually he is in the spiritual world and he is still in Goloka with Krishna, although he's in material world doing service for Krishna?
Yes. So you're right with that. See, there's different ways of looking at what liberation is, and this is where our understanding may differ. So reaching a liberated platform, according to the Vedic scriptures, actually means that we have left behind all material attachments. And that is a state that all paths eventually lead to. Whether you are engaging in Vedic study like jnana, yoga, whether you're engaging in Ashtanga yoga, Hatha yoga, properly now, not the modern interpretation of it, or Bhakti yoga, we all get to that point of liberation, which is, I've cut off all material attachments. So when we say we want to be liberated from all material attachments. But then there's another component to that liberation, whether you are attached to Krishna. So you get detached from something, you get attached to something. So anyone theoretically could follow all the other paths and become liberated. But if they don't get attached to Krishna, they don't actually enter into the spiritual world. So what does it mean to enter into the spiritual world? It means exactly what you said. It means something that's not necessarily bound by you having to be in that spiritual world. Because this material world is only material to us because in our consciousness, it's for our pleasure, our enjoyment. We could say then it is a state of mind. When that consciousness is uncovered, when it becomes manifest as pure Krishna consciousness, then this material world is not material anymore because it's for Krishna. Everything is for Krishna. When everything is for Krishna, what is it? Spiritual, right? So therefore, there is no difference then between this world and the spiritual world. It is the spiritual world. Sri Prabhupada was saying that I think a few classes back in this same chapter, that for Krishna, actually, there's no difference between this world and that world, because he is not in any other consciousness but pure spiritual consciousness. It's us that's perceiving it as different. The same way he says that the energy The electrical energy is the same, whether you use it for heating or cooling. Right? For the engineer, it's the same. For the person perceiving it on the other side, it may be hot air, cold air, but the electricity is the same. So the energy is the same. As soon as the perception is that it's not for me, it's all for Krishna, when we've transcended even that liberated stage, and we've gone to that stage of Krishna consciousness, because even past liberation, there is getting attached to Krishna through devotional service, real devotional service, then we are situated in the spiritual world, whether we are actually here or whether we are in the spiritual world proper, we could say. So definitely, spiritual masters, our acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, the Goswamis, it's all the same to them, whether they were here or there. It's all the spiritual world, because they were in full consciousness of Krishna. So he was always there with them, and they were just able to like go into samadhi and be present in the pastimes of the Lord. Prabhupada never left the spiritual world as far as we can understand, because he was seeing things very differently the way you and I were seeing. He could see Narada Muni when he appeared in the Kirtan. He could see whether the deity of the Lord, the deity form of the Lord, who he was of course seeing as Krishna, being in the spiritual consciousness and therefore the spiritual, he could see whether the Lord had eaten that day, whether the Lord was being taken care of in that day. Some other great souls like his Holiness Govinda Swami Maharaj were also able to perceive things from the Lord because of being in that consciousness. So definitely it's something that for them, there's no difference. There's no difference. So if they are sent on assignment, we could say, to the spiritual, to the material world, they're still in that spiritual consciousness. So it is practically the same for them as it is for the Lord. It's all the spiritual world. We do know though that there's a time where we can be situated in that same selfless mood of wanting to serve the Lord more than we want to be liberated. But of course, you understand now that we actually need to be liberated in order to feel that. In order to be liberated, then situated in pure devotional service. Then when you come to that pure devotional service, it's all the same to you anyway, but you're also now situated in this great, deep, and loving compassion for the souls on one side. So you definitely want to help the Lord by staying in the material world and preaching. But on the other side, you accept the Lord's will, like whatever he wants you to do, stay here or go to the spiritual world. And that's verse 8 of Shri Shikshashtakam. That's the state that we're actually meant to achieve. That's why it's the concluding verse. We'll just read that translation, because that's the state that is the highest of all goals in spiritual life. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Right? So we see the difference there. That when we come to the state of loving Krishna so much that whether he tells you to stay here, whether he tells you to go, whatever he wants you to do, whatever he doesn't want you to do, you just do it. You don't have any will of your own, we could say. And that is not in a negative sense. That is in the sense of being on an absolute level now, where you're able to dovetail yourself with everything that the Lord wants. So there won't be any question of where you want to be. My understanding, though, is that if you still have such desires to be transferred to the spiritual world, that love is still slightly conditional. Right? It's not like the unconditional love of the gopis or the other residents of Vrindavan. This is what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood is like in the Shikshashtakam. Generally, of course, all the residents of Vrindavan, but particularly in the parental relationship, the relationship of friendship and love are all unconditional. But if we still have some conditions, we want to achieve something in the spiritual world, we know that there are those types of liberation where you can achieve the same form as the Lord, live on the same planet, be an associate of him, have the same opulence. I think it is. There's 4. Samatya, Sarupya, like that. So those you can achieve. You can achieve. Your devotion service may not be as pure as the residents of Vrindavan, but still you're situated in some service of the Lord, but you still have this desire to be liberated in this way. And you can achieve that by his grace. And that is the Vaikuntha planets. But if we're aspiring for completely unconditional love, then that's another level that we have to pass beyond, where we have no other desire but whatever Krishna wants. And that's what the Goswamis are teaching us, so that, of course, if that is our spiritual destiny, then this is what we can achieve in the end. Is that okay, Rahul? Was that helpful?
Yes, no, that's very helpful. Thank you very much, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Are there any other questions or comments? Can we go on a little more, Paramatma Prabhu, or is there anything that...
Hare Krishna, you can carry on. Thank you.
All right. So, so we'll just comment on the last few wonderful days of festival. So, Shri Radhashtami was on Saturday. This is a very wonderful observance of the appearance day of Srimati Radharani, the Lord's tender-hearted female companion, as Srila Prabhupada says, the mother of the universe, and a very nice realization that was explained a few times by the speakers on the weekend, is that Prabhupada said that God is not just Krishna alone. God is Radha Krishna. Right? This is our meditation. And of course, both of them have combined, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is the Krishna of this age, and we're so fortunate that he is in the same form as with his Sri Radha. And so we worship him, and through the chanting of the holy names, as Bhagavatam explains, and this is how we attain Radha and Krishna. This is our ultimate goal. Then today is the appearance day of Lord Vamanadev. Lord Vamanadev is one of the Leela avatars. A Leela avatar is the pastime incarnation of the Lord. So in all these pastime incarnations, the Lord has specific purposes related to the three main objectives that he comes to this world to achieve: to destroy the miscreants, to deliver the pious, to establish principles of religion. So in the appearance of Lord Vamanadev, he came to relieve the distress of the pious, the demigods, by suppressing the miscreant. He didn't kill the miscreant in this case, because the miscreant was his devotee. So very, very much it's the same kind of mission as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this age. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this age doesn't kill the demons like Krishna did. Lord Vamanadev also didn't kill the demon, Bali. But rather the Lord kills the demoniac mentality. And Lord Vamanadev did the same. Right? He punished Bali. We said that karma is not just wanton punishment. There is a purpose. It's to purify us of our sins, to teach us lessons. So Bali learned his lesson and he surrendered to the Lord, Atmanivedana. He gave everything to the Lord. So the theme of surrender is very apt for our class today. And by that surrender, he was freed of his sins. The Lord also freed him. The Lord had tied him up. So the Lord freed him and actually gave him, we could say, even a better kingdom than Indra. Why? Because the Lord gave himself in that kingdom. The Lord personally guards the kingdom of Bali Maharaj. The kingdom that the Lord awarded him is called Sutala, and it's in the lower planetary systems, but the Lord personally actually guards that kingdom for his devotee. And it's also said in the next, I think, Manvantara, if I'm not mistaken, or the next Yuga, I must actually check it. Bali Maharaj is going to be the next Indra. So in the end, he still gets to be Indra anyway, but in the right way, with the Lord's sanction. He was trying to take the position of Indra before on his own. So we said the property of the Lord is the proprietor of this universe. We can't do anything without his sanction. So Bali Maharaj couldn't take the universe from the Lord and put it under his own jurisdiction. But when he surrendered to the Lord, he got that universe and much more. He got the Lord himself. This is the lesson that we learn from that. Then it's the divine appearance of Srila Jiva Goswami today. Like we said, one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, and one of the powerful acharyas in our line, who has given us so much of bhakti literature by which we can achieve the highest goal of Sri Vrindavan Dham and all the loving, completely surrendered and unconditional relationships of love we can have with Krishna. And tomorrow is the appearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We observed a half-day fast for that today. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur came in the line of the Goswamis. He was the spiritual master of the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, right? So he's known as a Param Guru for all of us. A Param Guru is like saying sort of a great grandfather, but like a term that can be applied to all the grandfathers before the grandfather. Sorry, all the grandfathers before the father, everyone else. So it's like a grand spiritual master. So all the spiritual masters that came before Srila Prabhupada, including Srila Prabhupada, all the spiritual masters that came before our spiritual master can be called the Param Gurus. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is one of our Param Gurus. It was he who pioneered the idea of spreading Krishna consciousness throughout the world. He actually made many inroads into the West. He sent books. He belonged to the Royal Asiatic Society of London. He envisioned the temple in Mayapur, where even Westerners would be joining with people of Indian origin and spreading Harinam Sankirtan. So he had this desire. He was a prolific writer. He was a most extraordinary preacher, pure devotee, a perfect householder, a most dear and empowered servant of Lord Chaitanya. And because of all his efforts, he prayed for a son who would help to take this mission further. That was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and that spirit from Bhaktivinoda Thakur was carried through Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's preaching, and that spirit was then entrusted to Srila Prabhupada. When Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur met Srila Prabhupada, it's not a coincidence that the first thing that he said to him was, "You're an educated young man, you should preach in the Western world or in English." So directly from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this message was carried through Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada fulfilled that desire of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So all of us are part of that vision, and we should pray to the Acharyas, pray to the Lord for all their mercy, so that we can help ourselves and help others as well. So thank you all so much for your attention. I'm sorry that class was a bit long today, but please join us next week. I think we'll be back to our Wednesday time, and we'll continue the discussions on chapter 20. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Oh, Kirtan, we have a request from Paramahansa Prabhu. Prabhu, is it not too late?
Just for 2 minutes, Maji, it's okay. Just to close off. Thank you.
Okay.
I think we're still in World
Bye.
Holy Name Week, I think. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Maji.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Thank you again so much, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.